Discovery of new inscriptions and their impact on history. We have the great pleasure of having with us today a distinguished guest to speak on this subject, Professor K. Thapliyal, who is Professor Emeritus, Lucknow University, where he served for more than 36 years as lecturer, reader, professor, and head of Department of Ancient Indian History and Archaeology, Dean Faculty of Arts, and Emeritus Professor. Professor Thapliyal has been General President of the Numismatic Society of India, General President of the Epigraphical Society of India, President of Section 1 Ancient India of the Indian History Congress, and the General President of the UP History Congress for 2017. So needless to say that Professor Thapliyal is one of the biggest authorities on the subject of epigraphy, on the subject of inscriptions. We know that inscriptions are critically important for the history of ancient period, especially in India. They assume a lot of importance, and in fact, one might argue that in deciding the periodization of ancient Indian history, inscriptions have played probably a critical role. Like when the Ashokan inscriptions dating from the 3rd century BC were finally read in the 19th century, that helped many things for the scholars of ancient history. And of course, there are many other famous inscriptions of that kind, like Junagadh rock inscription, Hathi Gumfa inscription, and so on and so forth, and found in many forms, obviously written either on a stone or, of course, Tamarpatra inscriptions, which are found, many of which are found every year. So in the absence of, or sometimes compared to other sources, obviously these inscriptions are able to provide a lot of corroborative information, along with their use with archaeology and archaeological and other sources. They become very, very important. So as I said that in today's lecture, Professor Thapliyal is going to talk about the discovery of new inscriptions and their impact on history. So once again, I welcome Professor Thapliyal and request him to proceed with his lecture.
I thank Dr. Mishra and other authorities of the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library for inviting me to deliver this lecture. Well, my task has, the introduction part of it has already been done by Dr. Mishra, and I need not to repeat it. Well, the subject is on the screen, or will be on the screen very soon, and he has also told you I need not repeat it. Well, the inscriptions, some of them corroborate, as he told just now, some contradict, some add new information, and some of them solve lingering on problems. Now, I just start with the Ashokan inscription, about which Dr. Mishra just talked. Now, there was a time when a number of inscriptions were found with Devanam Pir, without the name of the king. Now, it was very difficult for the historians to identify the king. James Fringzip, who is known for the decipherment of the Brahmi inscription, proposed that there was a king named Devanam Pir Tisri in Ceylon, and he perhaps was responsible for these inscriptions. He forgot that a king of an island, how could he get his inscriptions recorded through the length and the width of the Indian subcontinent? At the same time, there was no inscription of that king in Ceylon itself. Now, Turner, a Pali scholar, did suggest that in some Pali chronicle, there is mention of Ashoka as Devanam Pir. But since this evidence came from Sri Lanka, and that too of 4th, 5th century AD, well, still the doubt were there. In 1915, at Maski, which is in Raichur district of Karnataka, an inscription was found, which inscription I have given you a slide here, which begins with Devanam PS Ashoka. That is Ashoka, the Devanam PS. And then this completely establishes the fact that this is the title of Ashoka. Now let's come to another one, that is from the Kushana period. We know that I have given you earlier what was the position of Kushana chronology and Kushana kings, and after an inscription, Ramtek inscription, which was found later. Now this is Kuzul Cataphysis, followed by Bhima Cataphysis, Kanishka. Now there is a time when people thought that there were two families of the Kushanas. The first two, with Cataphysis in the end, belong to one, and under SHKA, these three, they belong to another one. There was another view that, well, their Kanishka group preceded Kuzul Cataphysis group, but the excavations conducted by Marshall at Taxila clearly showed that the coins of Kuzul Cataphysis and Bhima Cataphysis were found in the lower strata, and that of Kanishka group in upper strata, which completely established that Kuzul Cataphysis and Bhima Cataphysis preceded Kanishka. But the relationship and the chronological sequence is not definitely known. Now in the Ramtek inscription, we for the first time come across the name of a king, Bhima Taktu. And it's written there that Bhima Taktu was son of Kuzul Cataphysis. That means that the view that Bhima Cataphysis succeeded, or he was a son and successor of Kuzul Cataphysis, was no more valid. And also it gave clearly that Bhima Cataphysis was son of Bhima Taktu, and also that Kanishka was son of Bhima Cataphysis. Thus, the Ramtek inscription for the first time solved the riddle about the genealogy and chronology of the Kushana kings. Let's come to another one. There is a Nalanda sealing of Buddhagupta. You know Bhitari, which is in Gazipur, near Gazipur. There on a seal, there was genealogy of the Gupta kings. And in that genealogy was mentioned a king, son of Buddhagupta first, but his name was mutilated partly. And the first part of it was lost. The second part was Gupta. What could be the name was only a guesswork. Buehler, an eminent genealogist, suggested it could be Stirgupta. Now, there was someone, a forger, who could write in the style of the Puranas. He somehow came to know about the reconstruction of the name as Stirgupta. And in a Purana called Bhavishyottara Purana, there is a chapter which is called Kalyugaraja Vritanta. In this chapter, he incorporated the name Stirgupta there. Presuming that an eminent genealogist like Buehler won't make any mistake. But later on, there in a Nalanda sealing, the name of Kumaragupta's son was clearly Purugupta. Now this shows that Buehler was not correct in reconstructing the name as Stirgupta. Now, but some other, if it so happened that later on in 1903, the first article that he wrote, Buehler, was in 1893. And the sealing of Nalanda was studied in 1903. Within 10 years, this man has forged this and incorporated this name, which completely made the Puranas, the validity of the Puranas was lost. Now, thus, how we see here that forgery was being done by the people in the writing of the Puranas, and it is because of that some of the information in the Puranas is considered is of less validity. Now let us take to another one. Now, discovery is writing to a king named Ramgupta. Well, in 1923, French scholar Sylvain Lévy found quotations from a book called Devi Chandraguptam of Vishakadatta. Now, these quotations he found in a text called Natya Darpan, authored by Ramchandra and Gunachandra. After that, a few more quotations from that very text were found in other works, but we know that the Devi Chandraguptam of Vishakdatta in itself is not available now. Now, from these quotations, all taken together, we know that there was a king named Ramgupta who was invaded by a Shaka ruler, and he surrendered his wife to please the Shaka ruler. His brother Chandragupta, he was ashamed of this work, and he, in the guise of a female, entered the camp of the Shaka king, killed him, and later killed also Ramgupta. Now, this is all what we know from these quotations. Later on, in the Harshcharit of Bana, our eminent prose writer, we know that there is a verse called, it is written there, Aripuresh Parakalatra Kaminam, Kamini Vesh Gupta, Chandragupta Shakapatim Asatayat. It means that Chandragupta killed the Shaka king in the guy. He disguised as a woman and killed the Shaka king who was desirous of another man's wife. So it is some sort of a corroboration of it. And in fact, there was an array of corroborations after that. Now, the commentator of Harshad says that the woman was the sister-in-law of Chandragupta. This continues, discovery relating Ramgupta. There are 3 slides, then I'm continuing further. There is one text in Persian. It is Mazmulut Tawarikh. Now, it mentions that there was a king, Rawal, who was invaded by an enemy, and he surrendered his wife to his enemy. His brother was Barkamaris. He killed that enemy king, and he also killed his brother and married his widow. Now, then we have got inscriptions of the Rashtrakuta kings. The first Rashtrakuta king is Amoghars, whose inscription is found in the form of Sanjan plates, where he says that there was a Gupta king who killed his brother and married his wife. Now, 2 more, say, inscriptions that are of the time of going forth, well, we know Kambe and Sangali plates, they say that there is a king Sasank, who is to be identified with Vikramank, who is to be identified with Vikramaditya, and who is to be identified with Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. Says that he was as great as Sasan in giving things in charity, but he, unlike him, he didn't treat his brother cruelly, nor violated his wife. Bandhu Istri Gaman, as it is called there. Now, Ramgupta's copper coins were found in Malwa. Now, I've just given an example. These are the coins of Ramgupta. But since Guptas are known for their gold coins, still there were certain scholars who doubted that these coins may not belong to a king of the Gupta dynasty. He might have been a local ruler. Of course, we know from the time of Samudragupta, the Aran inscription, Aran is in eastern Malwa, has been there of Samudragupta. So it was the Malwa region was within the Gupta kingdom right from the time of Samudragupta. So it might have continued like that. So it is believed that perhaps there were the 2 brothers, Ramgupta and Chandragupta. They both fought for the kingship. Chandragupta II ascended the throne at Patliputra, and Ramgupta, who was the governor of Malwa, he declared himself king, issued these coins, and somehow he was later eliminated by his brother. Now, further information about it is found in 3 inscriptions from a village called Durjanpur, which is near Vidisha in eastern Malwa, Madhya Pradesh. Now, these inscriptions are on the pedestals of Tirthankar images. And in these inscriptions, we have got the title Maharaja Adhiraj. We know this title was very common with the Gupta kings right from the time of Chandragupta I to the last king Vishnugupta. So when these 3 inscriptions were found, you see, now it was believed that now there is no doubt that Ramgupta was a king of the Gupta dynasty, and for some time he was a Maharaja Dhiraj, at least for some time. Now, this we find that it took in 1923, as we have just seen, Sylvain Levy for the first time showed us the quotations from Devi Chandraguptam, and in 1968, these inscriptions found. Now that within these 25 years, a king who was not known from any source and who was first taken to be a commoner, and then later on as a king, and then Maharaja Dhiraj, and then ultimately a Gupta king. So thus we find that as time passes and new discoveries are available, the history is to be rewritten, and how this is one example of that, how through how many stages people were not convinced that he was a Gupta king, but ultimately when the inscriptions were found with the title Maharaja Dhiraj, then there was no doubt about it. Now, next please, this is a Ramtek Prabhavati memorial inscription. There is a king called Ghatotkaч. Of him only 2 coins have been found. There is a king named, there is a seal from Vaishali, which also gives the name Ghatotkač Gupta, and some scholars say that these two are identical. The third information about it is from two-man inscription. It is Guna district of Madhya Pradesh, and the date is 435, and this belongs to the reign of Kumaragupta. In this inscription, two-man inscription, we have the first king, Chandragupta, is eulogized. After him, Kumaragupta is eulogized, and after him, Ghatotkač is eulogized. Then, since this is the time period of the rule of Kumaragupta, it is generally accepted by scholars that Ghatotkač was a governor of Kumaragupta for the Malwa region. Now, this was the information available. A new inscription was found, that is, the title is there, Ramtek Prabhavati Memorial Inscription. Now, this inscription mentions one Ghatotkač, and it says that Ghatotkač was a son of Chandragupta II. Now, earlier, it was believed by some scholars, particularly D.R. Bhandarkar, that he was son of Kumaragupta. But this inscription, for the first time, corrected it and said that he was not son of Kumaragupta, but of Chandragupta II. And it also gives us very interesting information that he married a Vakataka princess who was the daughter of his sister or stepsister, Prabhavati Gupta. We all know that Prabhavati Gupta was daughter of Chandragupta II, who was married to Vakataka prince. So he married a Vakataka princess, Ghatotkač. And it is, it's not deemed proper to marry the daughter of the sister in northern India, but it is common in Maharashtra. So it is quite possible for some political reason this marriage was arranged. Now, in this inscription, we have an eulogy for Chandragupta II and for Ghatotkač, but not for Kumaragupta. We have seen earlier in the Tumain inscription, we have the eulogy of Chandragupta II, Kumaragupta, and Ghatotkač. But in it, even the name Kumaragupta doesn't occur. So that shows that the relationship between the two had got strained. And it appears that Ghatotkač rebelled, and he was helped by the Vakatakas. They might have even inspired him, instigated him, and helped him in getting the throne. He declared himself king, issued the coins, and those coins, I have told you, the 2 coins have been found. It means that he did rule for some time as a king, but was eliminated by Kumaragupta, and that is the story that we get from his Ramtek Prabhavati memorial inscription. This inscription is mutilated, but what has been read by the scholars at attempt and tried to interpret it, I've given you the gist of it. This is the inscription. Now we come to the next one, that is the discoveries relating to Buddhagupta. Now, after Skandagupta, a number of kings ruled about whom very little was known. Now, about Buddhagupta, first information that we get about his existence is from Aaron pillar inscription dated 484 AD. Well, I'm telling you that it is in the inscription is not dated in AD. I am telling you after converting it to AD, and other also I'll be doing the same, because otherwise it will take some time. I'll say Gupta era so and so equal to unnecessarily, but what we should know the end result is that it belongs to 484 AD. Now, the name Buddhagupta, it has a Gupta ending name. How do we know that from Guptas? Chandragupta, Samudragupta, Chandragupta, Sakwin Kumar Gupta, Skandagupta, all Gupta ending names. So there were some people who did think about it. The Gupta ending name shows that he belongs to the Gupta family. But since there was no title attached to this inscription, it was dealt with, and it was felt either he was a governor or a local king of Malwa. Now, after that, well, in 1894, and see, some silver coins of Buddhagupta were found, and these silver coins bore the date 494. Now, it is the prerogative of the king only to issue coins. So, when these coins were found, the question of his being a governor was ruled out. So, his status as a king was established. And what else was that it was also established that the Iranian inscription belonged to 484, and this was 494. So that means that he at least ruled for 10 years, was clear from this. Now, after that, some inscriptions are found at Sarnath and in Varanasi. Now, in these inscriptions, the date is 476. And this shows that his rule extended at least up to Varanasi. That means that he was not a local ruler, as it was suggested by some people when only we had the discovery of the Aaron pillar inscription, but it was clear that from Aaron to Varanasi, this was the extent of his empire. Now, then people thought that since the last Gupta king also ruled in Bengal, so they thought that there was a division of the Gupta empire. The western division in Malwa to Varanasi was ruled by Buddhagupta, and from Varanasi to in the east to Bengal by another king. But in 1920, two Damodar plates were found. Damodarpur is in Dinas district of Bengal, and in that inscription it is mentioned Maharaja Dhiraj Buddhagupta. So naturally his title showed that he was a mighty Gupta king, and it also showed that his rule extended as far as Bengal. So it was known that Buddhagupta was a Gupta king, and his rule extended right from Malwa in the west to Bengal in the east. Now, in 1943, and a ceiling which had been unearthed earlier in the excavation but was studied very closely in 1943, up till now we could know he was a Gupta king, but we could not know what was his chronological position. What is his genealogical and chronological position? From this Nalanda ceiling, which gave the genealogy of the Gupta king, it was clear that he was son of Buddhagupta. Thus, it took, how many years it took? Conclusion is that successive discoveries for more than 1 century. In 1838, Iranian inscription, and in 1943, Nalanda ceiling. It took whom for 105 years for situating Buddhagupta in the Gupta history. Now, just to recapitulate, when Iranian inscription, doubt whether he's a local king or a governor. Coins found, is the status of king established. The date 294 showed that at least ruled for 10 years. His inscription from Damodarpur showed that he not only ruled up to Varanasi in the east, but up to Bengal, in the Dinajpur district of Bengal. And then ultimately, in 1943, the title Maharaj established that he was an imperial Gupta king. So this way, we can say the different stages of the new discoveries, how they change the status of Buddhagupta. And the last one that I'm going to talk to you is the Risthal inscription of Prakashdharma. Now, you know there is a mighty king, although not so well known, but his two inscriptions have been found in Mandsaur. And one is dated, which is 532 AD, and the other is undated. Now, according to the undated inscription, his empire extended from north from Himalayas in the north to the Indian Ocean in the south. It is said that within his territories were those areas which, if the Guptas had not conquered, as the text says, which were not under the rule of the Guptas, even those territories he ruled. And then his one achievement was, he says that he defeated the Huna king Mirkul. And it is stated there, Mirkul Nirpena Architam Padyugumam, whose feet were worshipped by King Mirkul. We all know that Mirkul was a Huna king, son of Huna Turman. So this is an interesting thing that this king had defeated the Huna king Mirkul. Now, this inscription gives a genealogy and chronology of the kings before Prakashdharma. You have seen that I have been talking about Yashodharman, but the inscription belongs to Prakashdharman, about which I'm now starting now. This from Risthal, this inscription. Now, Risthal, see, in Madhya Pradesh, this gives you the genealogy like that. Darpavardhan, Jayavardhan, Ajitavardhan, Vibhishanavardhan, Rajyavardhan, and Prakashdharman. Prakashdharman is the author of the inscription, is the king in whose time this inscription got recorded. And he had so many predecessors, 5 predecessors, who are mentioned as they have ruled before him. Now, this Prakashdharman is related to Yashodharman. We don't have any evidence for that categorically, but we can assume on the following grounds. Firstly, the name ending is Prakashdharman. He's Dharman here and Yashodharman there. Generally, if we know that kings of one dynasty had one name ending. As I've seen it, Chandragupta first, Samudragupta, Chandragupta second, Kumaragupta, and so forth. So this is one region. And another reason is that both are mentioned in the inscriptions as belonging to the Holikar dynasty. And also, we know here that the inscriptions of both the inscriptions of Yashodharman and those that of Prakashdharman was composed by one and the same person whose name was Vasule and who was son of one Kakku. Now, apart from that, we know that while Prakashdharman defeated Huna king Turman, Yashodharman defeated Huna king Mirkul, the son of Turman. And there is a gap of only 17 years between the date of the inscriptions that we have, the date of undated inscription. See, the date of the dated inscription of Yashodharman is 532. And the date of Risthal inscription is 515. So there is a gap of 17 years only. Now, we have to see that the inscription of Ashotharman only gives the date on which the inscriptions are recorded. He might have continued, he might have started his rule a few years earlier. So he could have started his rule much earlier than 532 AD. On the other hand, the Ristal inscription of Prakashdharma gives the date of the Ristal inscription. He might have started his rule, he might have continued to rule, I should say, for a few years more. For the gap of 17 years can be filled like this. How? That the rule of Prakashdharma might have continued a few years later, and the rule of Yashodharman would have started few years earlier than 532. So these all evidences, if not definitely, at least you can say almost certainly establish that they belong to the same family. And since the gap has been filled, it is quite possible that Yashodharman was immediate successor of Prakashdharma, and also that he might have been the son and successor. Although it is not clear, but if the 17 years gap can be filled, it could have been Yashodharma. Now, up till now, before Ristal inscription were discovered, well, about Yashodharman, it was known that no predecessor of his mentioned in his inscriptions. So scholars believe that he was a commoner who by his own efforts attained kingship. It was believed that he, like a meteor, rose in the horizon of political history and dazzled with his brilliance of his conquests and then disappeared. But this inscription shows that this was not the case. He had 6 kings, 6 predecessors, not one, but even one was lacking before, and now 6 have been found. Now, that shows that how new information has transformed the whole history of the Holikar dynasty. And I may just tell you, before this Ristal inscription was found, since the inscription of Yashodharma was found in Mandsaur, R.C. Majumdar propounded a theory that Yashodharma started his career from Mandsaur after defeating Hunaki. But from Ristal inscription, it is known that Prakashdharma defeated the Hunaki Torma, and it is also mentioned that he erected a temple at Mandsaur. So the view of R.C. Majumdar is found incorrect, and it is believed that now that Yashodharman was already the master of Mandsaur region. And maybe even his predecessors, about whom no detail is known, but about whose names this inscription provides, might have also ruled in that region. Thus we find that these inscriptions of ancient India throw much light on the history and completely change sometimes history. It is the duty of the historians to be up to date in the matters of the discovery of the inscriptions, and accordingly, in the light of those inscriptions, to alter, to change, or to rewrite the history of India. Well, thank you very much. I was asked to talk to about, say, 40 minutes, and I hope I have been within my limits. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Professor Thapliyal, for a very, very comprehensive and insightful lecture on the subject. May I now invite questions and comments from the audience?
Well, the question should be relevant to the subject. No, your voice is not audible.
Oh, you can raise your hand or directly ask the question.
And the question should be relevant to the lecture as far as possible.
All right, I think it's taking time for questions to come up. There is one thing that about which I'm curious, Professor Thapliyal. Is it like, if we make a comparison between the role of inscriptions in the Indian history and the role of inscriptions in the history of other parts of the world, do you find more similarities or sort of divergence? Would you say that inscriptions are as important in the history of in the ancient history of other countries as they are in the case of India, or is it different?
No, in fact, what happened is after the time of Ashoka, where we, for the first time perhaps, he started writing these inscriptions, getting his inscriptions recorded. Now, India is a vast country, number one. Then writing was known from very ancient times, right from the Harappan times. There might be a gap in between or continuity, it is a subject of debate. And then we have got inscriptions have been preserved. The written records here, the climate was not congenial for the preservation of the records on Bhojapatra or say Talapatra, or for that matter on the cloth. So naturally for us, you can say that practically when Fleet started writing the Gupta history, practically all information available was from inscriptions, a few coins also. So that is from Indian point of view, it is like that. Now, there are certain countries where writing developed very late. So there are inscriptions, and then we have got so many changes. We've got hilly region where we've got so many stones, say we can on stone slabs and like that. There are other countries where such facilities are not available. So that way we have got, the Chinese do have the ancient inscriptions fairly in a large number, but otherwise in other countries, we know that in Mesopotamia, mostly they were writing on the clay. So that's the difference. So one thing is there, it is a long history we have here. So that is, and because of the lack of fragile material as evidence for that, inscriptions become much more important than anywhere else. You know that even the most of our ancient manuscripts are found in either Central Asia, in the area where there was desert and so humidity was not there, or in Japan. So like that, most ancient scripts have not been, say, manuscripts have not been found in India. So that way it is like that, but we can say that for Indian, ancient Indian history, well, inscriptions are the most important, or most, in some cases, fully, for example, about Ashoka. No coins of Ashoka are known. We don't have any other information in Bhojpatra, Talpatra, only inscriptions are available. Unfortunately, in large number, what happened when Cunningham edited all the inscriptions available to him, well, and then second edition was needed, and then Hulse in 1920 read it with adding so many inscriptions which were not known to Cunningham. So every year new inscriptions are being found. There was a time when one thought that, well, all Ashokan inscriptions have been found, and what Cunningham said, there would be hardly any possibility of finding any. When I was in MA, well, in Bhandarkar's book, it was written that 7 minor edicts of Ashoka have been found. And now we have got 18 minor rock edicts of Ashoka. And the 18th one has been discovered by me. and I've written a monograph on it, which has been published from Varanasi. See that the 18th minor rock editor for Shuka. So that way it's like that. It's relatively more important.
Would you say that? Would you say that the fact that the ancient Indian history, the writing of the ancient Indian history, is based much more on the use of inscriptions, especially the inscriptions written on stone, as you mentioned, but also other inscriptions, as compared to the history of other parts of the world? Do you think that from a methodological point of view, it makes a difference in the sense that the kind of source material that may have been written on stones or on Tamrapatra, etc., probably is in some sense, both in its origin and in its orientation, different from the kind of material that, for example, may be found in a well-preserved book, which, as we rightly say, obviously is, they are mostly not found in the case of India. So do you think that somehow the outcome of historiography is affected by this divergence in the source material?
Well, you're very correct. There was a time, if you study the inscriptions of the Achaemenid kings, particularly of Darius the first, now you find what is there. It is only written there, I conquered this, I killed this, so many kings, I say butchered so many people, my enemies, and so on and so forth. In the these inscriptions which have been found in Aksharistam and Persepolis, this is what he has written. Now, he has only these things to mention. If you take Ashoka, the thing completely changes. He speaks about what he has done for the men, for the animals. He preaches that one should say Satche, one should inculcate this Satche, Soche, Madhave, one should speak truth. He's preaching such type of thing, common type of the religious type of thing. He is also talking about what he has done for the people. Say planted trees on the roadsides, the goels, and so many other things he's mentioning. And the only he talks about his conquest is that of Kalinga, which instead of inspiring him to conquer other countries, made him so ashamed that he promised not to conquer any other country. So that way, then when we come to the Tamrapatra, this is only in India where the Bhumidan and Gramadan, to donate a village or to donate a land, was considered to be the most pious act. And as such, right from the time of the Sattvahanas onwards, the type or the Karandai plates, 52 plates are there in the inscription of the Rajendra Chol. Now, you find that it is, if your weight is so many tons, mounts, the weight of those, and then so many, it gives you the information about the conquest, about other things, and about the names of all Brahmins, their gotras and other things are mentioned there. So this made, so far as the copper plate are concerned, it is only in India where kings wanted to be pious, to appease the Brahmins, to develop the, culture and education, because by giving the land and villages to the Brahmins, it was like this, that they became free. They didn't have to bother for earning their livelihood. If they granted a village, then the tax from the village was, instead of going to the royal treasury, was going to the Brahmins. And that is why they didn't have to bother about, earning their livelihood, and they could devote their whole time for teaching and learning. So that was the case, how this type of concept is not in any other country. Any other question?
Any other question? Please go ahead if you have a question. Yeah, we have a question from the audience here, which is sitting with me in our seminar hall.
Please.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
So, in your presentation, you alluded to the need to rewrite history based on the emergence
Please,
of.
please, a little bit loudly. It's not audible clearly. Little bit loudly and slowly. And there, don't be fast. Please.
So you alluded to the need to rewrite the history based on the emergence of new evidence in the form of inscriptions. Now, if we were to do this, and if we also consider that there were many other groups who were without scripts, who were without the art of writing, and we see very clearly, even in the work of Chetan Singh, Himalayan Histories, how the pastoral groups were without the art of writing and without the scripts. So now if we are to rewrite the history based on the emergence of new inscriptions, which were probably written by those who were powerful, who were dominant. So if this is to be done, then how would the historians who are rewriting the history based on the new evidence hold on to the truth validity? Otherwise, it would be just like what K.N. Panikkar calls history as a site of struggle.
Yeah.
Well, very good question. The thing is, for anything, historian depends on evidence. For writing history, whenever you say anything, otherwise it becomes a grandmother's tale. You have to have evidence, and the evidence can be of any form. Suppose about those pastoral people or other people, even these people might have written, because, for example, I just say, I can't be like that. If you have evidence, you write history based on evidence. Whatever part, if you get information about them, you write about them. If you don't get it, well, without evidence, you can't write. But then fact is that suppose in the inscriptions of the Cholas and others in South India, often they gave lot of cows, buffaloes, sheep to the temple, and said that from the milk you produce ghee, and that ghee can be used as for the burning of the lamp in the temple. Now they say so many sheep were given, so many were given. Now somebody who's got evidence will say there were certain people who were taming these animals, who were doing that. But it is always be there. Well, but without evidence, you can't imagine. Whatever evidence you have got, for whom you have got, you have to write that history. For others, you have to infer wherever it is possible you write. But then, for it can be, for modern period, this will not be the problem. Even for medieval period, it may be not so problem. But for ancient period, you're right. This will be like that. And that is history. This is always happen. It is only even the concept of the changing history when we were students. Well, I'm past 85, but when I was a student of 7th years, our questions are mostly battlefield of Plassey, battle of this, battle of that, socio-economic history, even though it was known from these inscriptions, was not known. So history was that of king, that of battle. So our attitude has changed now. It's now that we try to see in all our, say, the society. But then when we don't have evidence, it will always be like that, not only in India, but anywhere, everywhere in the world. Now, yes.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
No, please, you tell me whatever you want.
And Professor Thapliyal, if I may add to this last question, the fact is that sometimes inscriptions may have been issued or written by the kings and princes, etc. But they do provide valuable information about the lives of ordinary people also. I mean, of course, it has to be inferred. Most of the time, it is not direct. But the fact is that if you read between the lines from one inscription, from one important inscription, so much additional information obviously can be derived about other things. So obviously that helps in the construction and reconstruction of history of, and of entire societies and communities.
Anyway, that's your suggestion.
Yeah.
I've just quoted that from the sheep were given, then there must have been some people who were taming the sheep. There's then pastoral people, there were the cattle rearing people. So some such thing. Even there are such type of examples where it say either you give so many sheep or so many buffaloes. So we could even know what was the ratio, what was the price of a buffalo and a sheep, and so on and so forth. But then as I told you, that this is not only here. Even here, Ashoka could tell even about the pastoral people. He said that there are in my empire where there are certain people who are the wild people, who are the jungle people. And then he says, I'll tolerate them as far as possible because they do some sort of a guerrilla warfare and trouble the other people. He says, I'll tolerate you as far as possible. So some sort of references will be there, but we don't have, as he says, it's always like that. Well, those who are the person, even you can say in these inscriptions, there may be a lot of exaggerations. There are genealogies given right from the God. There was the God Vishnu, from him this, from Brahma, and so on and so forth. So we have to pick and choose. Yes.
What I meant was, like, for example, in many inscriptions you can find the rate of taxation, the rate of revenue.
That is one thing. That again goes to the people who are well-to-do. His question was very different. His question was those people who didn't know writing, the jungle people, the pastoral people. That is different. The taxation also is only able to gather tax from those people who are well off. That is another one. You've got even taxes, and you have it is there. So many taxes are there. Sometimes over the 10, 20 type of taxes, even from common people might have been there. So
anyway,
yes.
I think it has been a very, very interesting and insightful discussion for all of us, and I think now there aren't any more questions. So I take this opportunity to thank Professor Thapliyal for kindly accepting our invitation and delivering this lecture this afternoon. Thank you very much, sir. And I thank all other participants, all the members of the audience for their participation in today's webinar.
Thank you.